This episode is brought to you by Our Insurance Guy, a local family-owned insurance agency. Eric and his wife Christina are passionate about focusing on the needs of homeowners, farmers, and business owners in the London region. Focusing on service, putting empathy and trust back into insurance. Contact Eric and Christina at ourinsuranceguy.ca for your no-obligation quote today. Alrighty, young man, that's the way we start off any phone call. You call, say hello. I say hello, young man. How are you? So you just said hello, Peter already. Peter, I'm going with hello, young man. Good
You're
to see you, young
flattering.
man. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine, thank you very much. It's a beautiful morning, and away we go.
I'm excited for today. We've got a good friend of both you and I, and Mike Stubbs today. We'll get a little stories, and it'll be, you know full well, Peter, there's going to be a little bit of Mike and I just kind of throwing out various stories from our participation in a career with you. So that one's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll get to that in a couple seconds. But as people would have noticed, we got a new partner with the show. We're excited to have our insurance guy on board, and not only are we going to just give him a plug off the top, he's a sports guy. So we said, you know what, let's bring him on. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Gagne. Nice to see you, Eric. How's it going?
Guys, how are you? Very good. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Thank you, Eric. And nice to have you on board. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, I think it's a great fit. We're a pretty active family for different sports here in the London area, and we have a local insurance agency that looks after a number of homeowners, business owners, farmers. So it's a great fit for us to kind of support you guys through this because I think a lot of people are missing that interaction of kind of keeping up to beat on local things that are going on and stories. And I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing to kind of keep us going through this kind of trying times, I guess.
You don't get any of that from the local TV station. They've disbanded some suit or skirt in the 18th floor in Toronto. Said we're not, we got to get rid of that sports stuff.
Did you put on the boxing gloves this morning and get a little fired up, Peter?
No, that's the truth. That's the truth. They did it all over the province.
The other thing, Eric, I gotta say, you've got to be inspiring Pete to get you got a good lighting situation there. There's a background scenario. I think we got to get some decorating people in for Peter.
Yeah, I'll get rid of my grandson's hockey game that's sitting beside me, and maybe we'll get a little more broadcast oriented.
It's all good. Eric, too, I know you mentioned your family, active sporting family. I've been watching your son try and hit 300-yard drives, which, for the record, even if you make the invitation to come golfing, I think I'll maybe commentate or just take some photos for you. I don't really want to be that put to shame by the golfing talents, because I know that's a good group. You got one son playing ball, one's golfing, and playing some great golf. He's an umpire. He's a referee. You guys are going nonstop.
Yeah, it's summertime. We're at the ball field, either with our son. He's playing AAA here in London, and or we have our other son that's umpiring up to AAA in this area. So, it's great to be active. We have a daughter that's in gymnastics, so we're either at a rink during the wintertime, ball diamond, or gym club during the summer. We love it. It's just part of our lives. And
what can be better for the kids to get in than to get involved in sports?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, I touched on earlier to you, Ryan, that I had a good story to kind of share with a local kind of hometown story. And back in 2010, I believe it was, our kids were getting ready for Halloween, dressing up for school, and they decided they were going to wear the stripes. They were going to be referees for the day. And of course, it was my oldest son that had the idea. So his younger brother jumped on board. They were 7 and 5 years old at the time. And, that day they went to, they had a medical appointment in London here. And they went to the appointment. And while they're waiting in the waiting room, out comes Don Van Massenhoven out of the waiting room. He's still an active referee.
You couldn't miss him.
He looks at the boys and he says, "Wow, I gotta love boys in stripes." He says, "This made his day, right?" So, what was really neat about that was he went out to his car, came back, and gave the kids, 5x7 autographed photos of him and a couple of hockey cards. And to this day, when I run into Don, he remembers that moment. We talk about it when I play hockey with Don. He gives me a couple, whistles every once in a while to give to my son. So I think that really ingrained into my son to have that excitement of seeing somebody at a young age that he loved refereeing at such a young age, and to have somebody take the time to do that. And that was kind of what I was going to say, is that, if there's ever athletes or people of public figure that are out there, especially during these trying times, even if it's just a little kind of sentimental thing, you take a moment, you say hi to a kid or something, and that could really change their outlook on what they do. And I think that's really ingrained into our son to really be excited about refereeing and umpiring and kind of taking that path. So
good for him.
And here's the crazy part, Peter. And as you well know, I have an affinity and a love for goaltenders. Eric's a goaltender.
I'm a goalie. Yeah.
You're a goalie.
I'm a goalie. Yeah. And we stopped playing in December. But I'm part of this league with Van Massenhoven and Bob Martin and all the guys. I had 40 games in between October and December.
Wow.
We're starting back up next week until the end of April, so I'm hoping for another 40 and get an 80-game season in.
Good for you.
Yeah.
You'll be the only person in this country that gets an 80 games.
80.
Yeah, you're the only. Who knows? You could be the next guy to play for the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah,
You'll be the emergency backup goalie for the next Leaf game. So.
Well, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the call.
We've this is a lot of fun and good to check in with you. As I said, we'll be keeping an eye on the social feed. We'll be kind of keeping an eye, especially because you post some stuff about the family and the gatherings and the kids and sports and that kind of stuff too. So definitely we're excited to have you on board. And we've seen you around the rink at Bud Gardens a few times. For those who may have also heard you a time or two at Bud Gardens,
a few times or two, yes. Yep. Filling in for Mr. DeLuey. Yeah.
It's hard to between the voice of Mike DeLuey and then we've got Mike Stubbs on today. Yes. Those are voices that the city of London pretty much knows perfectly well. And my favorite thing is everybody thinks they're a performance. Neither one is any different on a day-to-day basis. I said to Peter earlier, with people say to me all the time, "Is that his real voice or is he performing with Stubbs?" And I was like. That's how he orders coffee in the morning. That's how he talks to you day to day. There's no difference whatsoever. No, it's we're excited to have you on board with us, and definitely even Pete, Eric's even thrown a couple names at me so far here for maybe some guests. So I'm pretty excited about that. He may have dropped a hint when he was talking about hockey there a little bit.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
Van Massenhoven.
Yeah, and Bobby Martin. I know you love Bobby Martin, Pete.
Oh yeah, they're both ex-policemen, OPP officers.
We'll wait to see if Van Massenhoven comes on the show or not, because he still might be upset at me about a Junior B game I did between the Nationals and Strathroy back when he was involved. My color commentator may have made mention about having too many people in the building in Strathroy, and Mr. Van Massenhoven emailed me the next morning. He wasn't too happy about that. So long time ago, I'm sure.
It's a long time ago.
For sure. He's pretty easy going.
Yeah.
It's good. He's a good guy, and definitely some stories to tell, and that's why we're doing this, to tell him some stories and poking Peter constantly, because
you're not too hard though. It starts to hurt.
It's fun, in a joking way. I'm not gonna, he punches me if I jab him too hard. So, Eric, thanks so much for jumping on board. We look forward. Feel free to come and jump in if you got the boys playing ball. You've got gymnastics. There's always a few stories in there.
There's always a few stories. We really appreciate you having us be a part of this. And like I said, I think it's a positive thing you guys are doing, and love to see it continue even when things kind of get back to normal. I think it's a great thing to kind of keep people in the loop that maybe don't necessarily get inside the loop, I guess. So inside the ropes, right?
Thank you very much for patronizing us. We appreciate that.
And we'll make sure that all the insurance needs are taken care of you. We'll send you Peter's way. He'll call you every 3 days. Alrighty, my friend. As we said, thanks again to Eric for jumping on board. We're happy to have him join the show. Fun to local broadcasters, local insurance guy. I think it works nicely. So
sure does.
happy to have him on board. But as we mentioned, our guest today is a very good friend of yours. I know when people reference the fact of playing hockey or my other interest, I've always had a professional wrestling interest sort of thing. People, we rode up and down the roads together, sort of thing. And you and Mr. Mike Stubbs definitely did, ride the bus, ride the roads. Going through the broadcast career. I know I've had the privilege of working with Mike a few times. I think I've only had one opportunity, if I recall correctly, to work with both of you, and that was I want to call it, was it the Eurocan Cup that they put on at Bud Gardens way back a while ago? It was kind of they had a couple European teams come in and play a Knights alumni team.
Right.
That was the only time I got a chance to work with both of you, and I think I screwed up at least 3 or 4 times.
Well, I don't remember it, so don't worry about it.
Getting a chance today to talk to Mike and swap some stories, talk a little junior hockey. Surprise, surprise. But what is it about Mike that obviously for you has been obviously a friend and a great colleague over the years?
Yeah, his devotion to the job. He used to get on the bus, and we'd be riding down the bus, and all the guys are chit-chatting back and forth and chin wagging. Not Mike. Mike was on that computer from the time we got on the bus till the time we got off. He was studying the other team, memorizing their numbers and their names, and that's why he comes across as he does, because he works at his job. He memorizes things, and he knew all about the other team, all of them, and that was just remarkable.
And the thing for me that I enjoy most about this conversation is, as an outside fan and of both of you, I have said this. I have no bones of saying I'm a fan of both of you from a broadcasting perspective. I've got the privilege to know you both. Personally, I call you both friends. But if you want London Knights anything,
Yeah,
you can pretty much wrap it up between you and Mr. Stubbs.
yeah. Well, I'm the before, and he's the after. Stubbsy came along when I was finished doing the play-by-play of the Knights, and I was working television then, and I didn't do the games. So Stubbsy came along, and away we go. He's been the voice of the London Knights, except for a couple of years when he went to Calgary.
Yeah, and we get into a little bit of the broadcasting career. We talk a bit of current situation, and I'm just happy that somebody else is joining in on the let's poke Pete to find out some more stories. It's a fun one. Let's have a little fun. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Stubbs. Nice to see you, Stubbsy. How's it going?
Great to see you guys. Things are as pandemically friendly as they can be.
That's not very when it comes to junior hockey.
You said it.
Now I'll get to it before Pete does. When are they playing hockey?
The conversations continue. So I think that's the most important thing that we can have going, that there is still dialogue between the league and its teams and the government, and nobody's hinting at, it might not work this year. Everybody seems pushing towards something that could work. So I'm going to hold out hope. I'm going to hold out optimism.
Do you not think it would be better, though, Mike, if they scrapped this season and started working toward next fall?
Everything's on the table, but here's the thing. We've got the QMJHL that's found a way. The Western Hockey League is finding a way. And as much as are there safety concerns, always. Do you want to make sure that things are as safe as possible? Absolutely. I think if you can fit in even a really condensed schedule, 24 games, 26 games, whatever it is, that it would certainly help things out. Because what do we do with the NHL entry draft?
Yeah, that's right.
Do we bump 2021 into 2022? And then how does that affect things? So it at least gives a bit of a showing for draft eligible players. It's obviously not ideal, but right now nothing is.
Nothing is. No, I don't know. I just think that who would be allowed into the rinks?
Spectators. Well, nobody will be allowed. You won't be able to have fans at this rate.
It's a ticket-driven league too,
It is, and so that might take some government support. How would that go over?
Yeah.
These are all questions that are out there, but Saskatchewan has given support. Alberta has come up with a model for support. The Maritimes have been able to have some fans. I remember talking with the president of the Halifax Mooseheads recently, and he said, look, we examine this. It is going to be a year where we take a loss, but it's something that we feel we have to do to try and get the players a little bit of developmental time. And so that's how they've done it. Quebec, each team received essentially $1 million. They got $12 million for 12 teams. So I'm not saying that we need to see money from the Ontario government, but we'll see what they come up with. Right now, there's a great big table and there's a lot of items on it. And as they keep saying, everything is on the table, which is a lot better than nothing being on a table.
Yeah, that's true. At least they're doing something. Something is happening. We don't know if it'll come to fruition or not, but however, we'll just have to wait and keep the fingers crossed.
What's the tie up at this point, Mike? Is it because obviously the WHL, when they find a way to do it, with the fact that they had their American division and a couple of teams, obviously, is the tie up the border issue with the OHL, or is it simply like going back to Pete? On our first episode, Pete and I spent half an hour, 45 minutes, and he was just annoyed with the fact that whole no contact for this year, if the OHL wants to happen, or no intentional contact or whatever was. There were some people kind of saying that was just a way of kind of saying push off your plans for a while, sort of thing. What's the major tie-up, or is it just a dollars and cents and safety factor right now?
Well, we've heard from the beginning fans. That's a big one. The border is a big one because you only have 3 OHL teams in the United States. And then health and safety, I think, has been the ultimate priority all the way along. So we heard from Lisa MacLeod, the Minister of Sport, Tourism, and Culture, very briefly. She was talking about some other things, but she was asked a question kind of toward the end of February, and she said that they didn't have confidence in the plan that had been submitted by the OHL most recently, and so the league can then take that back. But it's the same as any negotiation. It's back and forth. It's making sure that things are okay. The American Hockey League apparently got a 600-page plan. So we're talking about very detailed things. Could you imagine sitting down and writing 600 pages of how you're going to treat a season differently from how you normally do?
I thought that's why we got into broadcasting, so we didn't have to read that much anymore.
600 pages?
They told me there would be no math.
That's it. And I'm sure there was a lot of math in there.
Yeah, that's exactly. I can imagine a 600-page brief on. My God, that's that thick. It's who's gonna sit down and read that crap?
Somebody would have to, Peter.
Huh?
They needed to have it in order to get themselves off the ground. And right now, the American Hockey League we've got 5 teams playing out of Canada, and there are those crossed fingers again. So far, so good. So
far, so good. Yep.
Is it more than likely that the Hub City talk is the possible rationale to it, or is that still that's a whole other ball of wax at the same point?
Yeah, I think that comes eventually as to how you do it. Brad Cochamilio, I thought, presented something really unique, and he wrote it up again late stages of February. And what he did was he kind of raised, okay, we're going to have hub cities. Let's just play speculation here. Who should be the hub cities? And immediately, if we start thinking hub cities, we start going Ottawa, Kitchener, Hamilton, London, and you think of the 4 biggest cities. He went second. We don't have any fans. What about Owen Sound?
Yeah.
Owen Sound has done phenomenally well in Huron, Perth, with case counts, and Owen Sound has L at the edge of the parking lot so that you would have an ability to house players there. They wouldn't have to go too far. So there are some creative ideas coming up, but that first thing that you've got to get through is permission from the government, and they want to know that the players are going to be safe, and that's the league's idea.
Yeah.
I mean, they need to know that the parents are safe. You can't have 16 and 17-year-olds taking to the ice and say, we're just going to try and wing it here. Yeah. Nobody wants that, not even the players. So that'll be number one. And I know it's getting late. I know that we're talking about a season that's not going to end on time. Seasons normally end middle of March. Regular seasons are done. That wouldn't be the case this time around, but everything would get stretched a little bit if they can make it happen. And the OHL not too long ago released a statement to the players saying we're still working with government. So here, I'll put up both.
All right, Mike, let me ask you this. What are the 2 best games you ever called in the OHL? Mine goes back way back to 1977. That 77 year was phenomenal. And when Danny Eastman scored the winning goal in Game 8 of a best-of-7 series against the hated, I mean, this wasn't the artificial. They hated each other. The St. Catharines Spin Cups and the Knights. The whole city exploded. And then my second most favorite game, I was doing it with you, was the first Memorial Cup.
Yeah, you know what, Pete? Even before I get to maybe the two favorite entire games, I still have a favorite moment that involved you.
Me.
And it was in the 2003-2004 season. So the year before the Knights won the Memorial Cup. They won the Hamilton Spectator Trophy as the #1 team.
Right.
And I can remember a game against the Sarnia Sting that the Knights won 3-0. And the Knights had never won the Hamilton Spectator Trophy before. They never won the league before. And I remember getting to the post-game show and looking over at you, and you just had this look on your face, just this look of satisfaction and appreciation. You were just looking out over the rink that was now quiet. No players were left. And I remember saying, Pete, what's on your mind right now? And you said, the London Knights just finished first overall.
Yep. Well,
and that was a moment. That was great. I still think one of the greatest games in junior hockey that anybody in London has ever seen is not the Memorial Cup final. That might have been one of the most well-played games, but that first game of the Memorial Cup where it was London against Rimouski on night #1, and the Knights had heard all of these stories about Rimouski, and Rimouski had heard all of these stories about the Knights. The Knights had started the year on an unbeaten streak that had stretched 31 games, and I think Rimouski had ended the year on a 30-game unbeaten streak, and you had Sidney Crosby. And Dylan Hunter always tells a great story about this, that they're in the dressing room and at some point somebody brings it up. Hey, how good do you think Sidney Crosby is? They've watched a lot of video on him. How good do you think he is? And somebody said, well, you know what? He's wearing skates. He's wearing gloves. He's wearing shoulder pads just like us. It's not going to be that different. And Dylan remembers the opening faceoff. And Rimouski won the opening faceoff. And the puck went over to Sidney Crosby, and he toe-dragged one of the London Knights defensemen, very good defensemen. They had one of the best top 4D in league history. So toe-drags those guys, zings a pass across to Marc-Antoine Pouliot, and he rings it off the crossbar. And everybody on the bench just kind of said, wait a minute.
Oh, wait a minute.
Maybe he is a little bit different than the rest of us. And they came through the first period losing 3-1 in that game. And you would think you'd go into the room and say, hey, what do we do about this? They went into the room and they said, I think that was the best that they could do. I think they were playing their best and we weren't. And they went out, and Mark Mathot had scored the first goal, and I forget who got the second goal, but Robbie Schremp got the tying goal. And then in overtime, Mark Mathot and Corey Perry wound up on a 2-on-1. And both will still tell you this, because both have said this. Both thank the crowd for this at Budweiser Gardens, because they're heading down the ice. Corey Perry has the puck on the right side, and the entire bench and the entire crowd is yelling, two, as if somebody's coming in behind Corey, and he takes that sneak look back, and he finds Mark Mathot, and he threads a beautiful little Corey Perry pass to him, and Mark Mathot heads right down the center track into the middle of the zone and snaps in the game winner. A guy who had, I don't think he ever hit double digits in goals in a season. He gets two massive ones in an overtime victory. So, that would be one. And then the other game that has been so much fun, it was a lot of fun. And again, it's a Memorial Cup game, but it was the Memorial Cup final game in 2016. It was a nerve-wracking game, but it's the stories that you hear after that make it so good. Because the Knights were down 2-1 with 4 minutes to go in the game. And they went into the last TV timeout. And so the whistle goes. Tyler Parsons skates over to the bench. Everybody's sitting there, and everybody's head's kind of hanging a little bit because, they poured shots at a goalie named Chase Marchand, who had played in the Ontario Hockey League and just seemed to have it that day. They had done everything they could, and here they were down 2-1. They'd won 16 games in a row, and maybe 17 was just too much to ask. And then Brandon Crawley gets up and walks to the middle of the bench in this TV timeout The coaches had finished saying whatever they were going to say. And Brandon Crawley starts saying, no, it doesn't end like this. This is not happening. This is not happening. And he yells like that for about a minute. And then he goes back over to the other side of the bench and he sits down. And kind of Dale Hunter describes it. Hey, the head started to pick up, and Dale thought, I got to change something up here. Dale's always that intuitive coach where if things aren't going right, he's always got some little thing that he's going to try just to change things. And Christian Dvorak had been taking defensive zone faceoffs whenever he could, whenever it was on his side of the ice. And then they'd get the puck out of the zone, and he would quickly head to the bench to get out with Matthew Tkachuk and Mitch Marner, who he played with. And so Christian Dvorak is headed out with Max Jones and Aaron Barisha right off this faceoff. And Dale Hunter says, hey, Devo, stay out. And so Christian knows not to come to the bench after the faceoff. What do you know? The Knights win the faceoff. They get the puck down the ice. Max Jones gets knocked down, takes some time to look at the referee because he'd been knocked down, and that allowed the puck to go into the right corner. If Max had continued on, he would have been early. But because he took a second, looked at the referee to see if there was a penalty, he got back to his skates, and he goes into the corner just at the time the puck arrives and throws a body check that knocks the puck free to Aaron Barisha. He centers it in front to somebody who shouldn't have been on the ice.
Devo.
And he scores to tie the game.
Yeah, and I remember you calling that game, and especially the overtime when they went into overtime. You weren't anticipating a goal by Tkachuk, but the goalie was well screened, if you'll recall, by Devo. He skated across in front of the goal as Tkachuk shot, and in it went. And they
later had discussions as to whether or not the puck glanced off Christian Dvorak. As much as it says Matthew Tkachuk, even Matthew and Christian will say, maybe there should be two names there on that. But did you guys know that there were 7 people in the building who thought that Rouyn Noranda had won that game? Have you ever heard that story?
No.
There were 7 people who did not believe the London Knights had won the game. In fact, they thought that the Huskies had won.
Oh.
They were underneath the seat because the place was jammed.
Yeah.
And there were no places for the Knights scratches to sit. So among those scratches, guys like Evan Bouchard and Alex Formanton, and you also had Rob Wilson, the Knights video coach, and Joey Poljanowski, who was part of the Knights team staff. And there's 7 of them, and they're down underneath the stands in the Knights dressing room, which when you have Memorial Cups, there are dressing rooms that are the ones that are in the building, and then there are some that are made. And it's pretty incredible to see what teams will do to make rooms. I remember Ottawa's when the Knights hosted the Memorial Cup in 2005. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful what the staff had done.
Yeah.
And so they had a really nice room, and the guys are in there watching on TV. And so what you see on TV, because remember, as you will well know, you guys being in TV as much as you are, it's a wee bit of a delay in TV. And so Rouyn Noranda shoots the puck into the London zone and shoots it in deep. And because there's a delay, these guys are watching that happen on the TV, and all of a sudden, there's this huge cheer that comes up because the puck is deep in the London zone. Yeah. And these guys know there's a delay, but immediately they think, we just lost. There's no way that in 7 seconds, the puck's going to get out of the zone down the ice, and we just lost the game. And they watch as Ole Juolevi chips the puck to Aiden Jameson, and he starts skating out of his own zone. He gets to just before the blue line and just flings a puck at Matthew Tkachuk, who was madly trying to get back into the play. The guys on the bench were all, hey, Chucky, get back, because the puck had been shot in. And then it was, no, go. And he goes down the left wing. And like Pete says, he had this little ability to pull the puck into his body and shield it from Chase Marchand. Christian Dvorak skates across the front of the goalie, and he snapped it in. And those stories made that game just so unique.
When you called that game, that goal, you didn't sound as though he had a chance to score. You sounded.
I didn't even know he'd shot.
He won the Memorial Cup. They won the Memorial Cup. Did you have a good broadcast location out there?
Oh yeah, very good. In fact, we were in a really good spot for that one because we were far on that end of the ice.
Oh.
But I didn't get the word shot in just because it came so close. And you never know what's going to come out in overtime. I don't like to script things.
No.
And one of the unique things that had happened, thing that happened, but Matthew Tkachuk's billet mom had passed away, and her name was Sue. And I remember looking up at, because there'd been so many things. Matthew Tkachuk wore the number 7, and 7 that whole week just kind of appeared everywhere. And players talked about it, or team personnel talked about it. You keep seeing, Matthew Tkachuk's number. And I just looked up at the rafters and said, thank you, Sue, because it just seemed like at the moment when things needed to happen, they just did.
They did.
And it was just, and Pete and Ryan, you know this, for teams to win as good as they are, they have to have luck. They have to have things just fall into place. Things just have to work out. And that year, there was a lot of hard work behind the scenes making that happen. But sometimes you put in all that hard work and they still don't work out. But in this case, they did. And the Knights ended up flying back the next day on a flight that seemed to take forever because we had to, the runways in Red Deer, or the runways are short. And so taking all the teams into Red Deer was an aircraft company called Flair Air. And they got their start bringing oil workers into tight spots. You had to land in tight spots.
Oh.
And so they could fly a team full of people into a runway that was really small. And they had that ability. And so you put on the brakes really fast when the runway is short. And I didn't understand it because we got off the plane and we'd heard this story. And then you look at the end of the runway and all it is prairie plains. There's just field. And I thought, couldn't somebody bring some asphalt and put a little bit more down so that we didn't have to hit the brakes kind of too hard? And so you can't carry that much fuel because it weighs down the plane if you have a short runway taking off. So we had to land and refuel and then wait, and then we ended up coming back. So thank you many years later to all the fans who waited at Victoria Park, because I know that we were a little late getting there, but thanks for being there because that was a heck of a welcome.
Yeah.
I remember that one well because I was standing on a set of rafters at the back of the grandstand when people walking by going, when are they getting here? and I'm like, I'm talking to a few people. I think they're at the airport. They might be on a bus. It might be a plane related matter. We're not sure. But
we needed to refuel.
Yeah. I remember that afternoon well. Do you think, like the other night, when, or I should say, Calgary played Toronto, how much chirping goes on between Mitch and Tkachuk? I would imagine they chirp each other pretty well.
I was going to say, Matt, and there's no chirping or conversation happening whatsoever.
All in good fun. Those guys.
Oh yeah.
As ever. But yeah, I'm sure if one of them misses something or one of them gets something in the game, I'm sure there's a little bit that goes back and forth.
Yeah, they were line mates, not just teammates. They were on the same line. So I was thinking about that the other night when I was watching the game, that there got to be a fair bit of chirping, but between those two guys anyway.
Oh, there are so many different players. It's hard to watch a game now that doesn't have at least one night on one side, and sometimes they're on former nights both ways.
Yeah.
And so, they, it's the same thing as any team. Once a part of that team, always a part of that team.
Yep. You bet.
Now, Mike, a part of this will be, surprise, we talk about the Knights for a while. Talking a bit about, obviously, I'm going to basically, this is the enjoyment part for me. I think I spent most of my college days at Fanshawe going, I really wish I could sit down and talk with Pete James and Mike Stubbs for a while, but I was, brand new and didn't know what the heck I was doing. So it took me, 15 years, but I finally got there for a bit. For those, people know you and they stop you, I'm sure, everywhere, talk to you constantly about night stuff and so on and so forth. But when did kind of, I know you went to Western, so obviously there was a connection to the city sort of thing, but when did this whole kind of passion and involvement and, you don't just kind of all of a sudden go, I'm going to go do play-by-play in London. Take us through the story of how the love of the city, because you're from out of town. When did the love of the city come, and how did the connection to the Knights start up?
Well, something's always drawn me back because I was born in London, but we moved away when I was 3 because my dad worked for the federal government. And so he had an office that he ran in Hawkesbury that he moved to when I was about 3 years old. And we lived in Hawkesbury for a while. And I remember being about 5, and we were on our way back from Christmas, which all of their family is in Tilsonburg. And so we were on our way back from Tilsonburg to Hawkesbury, which is about an 8-hour drive. And there was a snowstorm, which made it about 15 hours. And I was sitting in the back seat of a Chevy Duster, blue Chevy Duster.
Sounds comfortable.
Oh, unbelievable. And I think it was a bench that was basically some of that, we don't have it in vehicles anymore, but it was that plastic that in the summer you couldn't sit on.
Yep. We remember it.
Towels, so the kids could sit on towels just so you could sit in the car. If the car had been in the sun, you always had to have towels in your car. But this was the winter and it was cold. But I was sitting there with a hockey card poster. My aunt had gotten me a hockey card poster, and that was my treasured gift from that Christmas. Couldn't wait to get home so I could cut it up and do play-by-play on the kitchen table. And I don't know why that is. To this day, I have no idea why that is. I remember sitting on my dad's knee watching Hockey Night in Canada. I must have been about 4 years old. So it was in my life, but I really can't explain why I wanted to do that, but I did. And then that kind of progressed to when we got a VCR, recording games and turning down the sound, because I was never old enough to stay up late enough to watch the end of the game. So I'd record the game, and then the next day I'd do my little play-by-play of it. We were in kind of the Hawkesbury area. I think I would have been about, 8 or 9 when we got our first VCR. And so we'd watch the games in French. So it would mess me up because I knew a little bit of French, but I can remember thinking that roughing, which in French is rudesse, was rudeness. So I would give the 2 minutes for rudeness. I didn't know what the guy had done in order to get his 2 minutes for rudeness, but he hadn't been very nice. Yes, it's chirping. No chirping in those days. No, very kind hockey back in the late 70s and early 80s. Very kind hockey. And then, you know what? I came to Western. I wanted to get a degree, and I knew that they had a phenomenal campus radio station that did play-by-play of everything. And when I researched universities, for whatever reason, I couldn't find a play-by-play school, and I didn't want to be a journalist. That's not what I wanted to be. So I started researching campus radio stations, and York had a really good one, and they did play-by-play of everything, and Western did. And I thought, you know what? I really like London. Been there a couple times. And so I ended up coming back to London, going to Western, and I was lucky enough to do play-by-play of everything from hockey to football to basketball, and be the host and be the operator and be an analyst, even though I really maybe have the brain for that. Did it everything from hockey to football to one day Master Pan, who did Kung Fu, came, and I was due to interview him for an hour. And he was told at some point that this was a TV thing, and I didn't have a camera. This was not TV, this was radio. So he brought mats, and he kept getting up and taking off the headset and leaving to demonstrate. And
on radio,
didn't really have anybody else to talk to. So I just described what Master Pan was doing. And so you got into some interesting situations that made you ready for anything. If you can do play-by-play of Master Pan's performance, there was one time that somebody set up that we were going to do live on the radio. Unfortunately, you didn't necessarily have huge listenership for this, but they set it up that the faculty was taking on the student council in softball. And not only were we to broadcast the game because somebody was playing in the game who had the power to put it on the radio, but it was put over loudspeakers at Labatt Park so that everybody playing in the game could hear it. And we were told that we were going to be provided lineups, but we weren't. And so we had to do a softball game full of people who were just, regular old softball players.
Yeah.
And it was me and it was Greg Brady, who I now get to work with at Chorus.
Yeah.
We were doing the game, so it didn't take long before I think Brady leaned over and he said, "We're not doing this baseball game. We're just doing a talk show. Let's go." And we started just talking about whatever, and we turned it into a sports talk show. So
Well, they've got a couple of they've got some out of CHRW. Danny, what's his name? The kid on
Dan Schulman.
Dan Schulman,
There are
and Elliot
so
Friedman.
many. Oh, it's the walls are lined with so many different people who have been able to come out. And I got to thank Mario Cercelli for because the London Knights were looking for a play-by-play broadcaster, and I was about finished university, and I was set to go to Fanshawe, and he ran in and he says, "Do you have a demo?" And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Get it." And so I ran home, and it was on cassette, and clear cassette. And I can remember handing that in, and a guy named King Perry heard it and thought enough of it that he ran it upstairs to the station manager, and I kind of got an in and a chance. And I was a hard negotiator. I negotiated $70 per game that year. And I told my dad that because he questioned that. He said, "How are you going to eat?" And I said, "Dad, I don't care. I would do this job for a hat. I just want to do it."
I think Pete has told me to stop using that negotiating tactic for myself. I keep agreeing to doing things for a hat. So bad idea.
I still do stuff for a hat. Absolutely.
And then to go on the CHRW thing, in a very back corner of a music library somewhere consists of my first opportunity in broadcasting when I was in high school doing co-op. So you mentioned Mario. I remember Carlo Coschiala. Well, he was the first person who gave me a chance to sit in front of a microphone, even though I thought I was getting his coffee for about 6 months. But third day in, he goes, "Figure out how to write a sportscast. You're on tomorrow." They definitely provided some pretty good opportunities, that's for sure.
But how good is that? I mean, that's what you need to do. As much as I remember sitting beside Peter Marr, who was the voice of the Calgary Flames, and we got talking. This is shortly after we'd even met each other. He says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do play-by-play." He says, "Is that what you're doing right now?" I said, "No." He said, "Then be doing that, because whatever you're doing, you're going to become better at." So fortunately, Carlo did not have you getting better at getting people coffee. I'm sure you could have done that very well, but instead he said, "Hey, do this." And I get to teach at Fanshawe a little bit, and Ryan, I know you do as well. And one of the greatest things that Fanshawe offers is the opportunity to take someone, hold them over the water, and drop them in. And you know what? You might sink down to the bottom for a little bit, but eventually you're gonna figure out how to swim. It's a great thing to do. And like I said, I draw on those experiences that scared the heck out of me in university, where you were on the air having to make noise and you didn't know how to do it, what to do. But if you could get through that, you could get through just about anything.
Too many times when you don't know what to do, the phrase "boom goes the dynamite" comes out, but that's another story for another day.
Try and leave that one way in the back.
You mentioned, obviously, you get that the opportunity in Calgary. Some people I've had people say to me before, when I say Mike was with the Flames for a while, and they're like, "Wait, he was doing NHL and he came back to do junior?" And I'm sure you've had this question a million times. Wait a second, something's backwards here. But you've obviously come and done this now. Is that on that same advice of, I want to do play-by-play, and that was kind of where the passion lies, sort of thing?
You know what? Yeah, it's not too far off that conversation with Peter, and I thank him to this day, because it was a great one. I got lucky. I need to use that word a little bit more, because everything I do is part of being lucky. It really is. I'm lucky to have the wife and the kids that I do, for the support that they give, and the people that I've met.
The dog in the background.
The dog in the back. I'm pretty lucky to have a dog. Who doesn't like to walk a dog?
I heard you on radio the other day going on about your dog.
He ate this microphone here. This is an expensive thing, and I heard you on an end that plugged into a phone until he got that. So it's my fault, though. I left it too low. But no, that conversation with Peter, that helped. And I was doing pregame and postgame for the Calgary Flames, which, I mean, it's a dream come true. You get to be in the NHL. You get to interview NHL players. The league is a lot of fun. You get to watch the best of the best do what they do. You get to watch that in practice. Sometimes you see the coolest things in practice. You think games are fun. Watch what these guys are able to do when the pressure's not on or when they're not worried about turning the puck over. It's crazy. And yet I found myself, I did that for 2 years. And in the second year, I was missing play-by-play enough that I would pick a game or a night when the Flames were off and the Calgary Hitmen were in town. And I would go through a game prep like I would normally do. And then I would go to that game and I would just sit in one of the visiting radio booths way far away from anyone. No one could hear me because they blocked off the upper bowl. So there was no one around. And I would just do the game. And little bit by little bit, my wife would say, "You're really missing that, aren't you?" And we were having a family and we kind of sat down with a big piece of paper and we drew a line down and across and we went pros and we went cons. And we listed off everything that was good, everything that was bad, and we did our best to make a decision as to what we were going to do next. Was this something, did we want to have our family and stay in Calgary, and our trips every year as a family would be going back home because you want 4 tickets on a plane from Calgary. That's a family vacation to Disney.
Yeah.
That's what you have to consider. And so that was one. And everything just, again, I got lucky. Things fell into place. Mark and Dale Hunter were purchasing the team, and there was a change in who was doing the play-by-play. And so it kind of worked out. And, I thank Mark and Dale. I thank Barry Smith and Tom Cook, who ended up bringing me back. And, as much as you might say, hey, you missed the National Hockey League, you know what the other thing is? I love junior hockey.
Yeah.
And I think the two of you do as well. And I love junior hockey. And the NHL is a business.
Yeah.
And for my entire life, I was able to enjoy the National Hockey League as a fan.
Yep.
And then when you work in it, it's different. You're not a fan. You have to know everything that's going on. You have to study it. It's different. Instead of being like a fan, it is your job. Yeah. And I can remember when we had decided, because the Flames didn't make the playoffs, and we had basically made the decision and started some conversations about returning to London. And it was about the third round of the playoffs, and we'd made our decision. I remember sitting down and watching one of the playoff games that night. And it was a game that Dallas was in. I'm not sure who Dallas, I think it was Dallas Edmonton. I think they were playing the conference final. And I just remember this feeling of this is fun. I'm watching this game and I'm a fan again. And that kind of returned. And I've kind of been able to feel that about the NHL ever since. And the ride with Mark and Dale and being able to learn the things that they can teach you and watching their success. I mean, I wouldn't trade this for anything.
No, it's really something, the way that Mark and Dale run the nights. They both have specific jobs to do, and they do them so very, very well. Mark could spot a hockey player in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and Dale would teach him how to play camel ball. They have that ability to do their jobs extremely well. That's why they're successful, and they know the meaning of hard work, both of them. And
you just named, when people ask what's the success or what makes the London Knights successful, Pete, you just named the 3 elements right there.
Yeah.
The work ethic that comes from your dad, Dick, and values and how to treat people and all of those things. And then, the ability to spot talent and the ability to develop it. In junior, to be successful, you need both of those things. It's so hard in junior to have them, and to have them in a tight space, because you've only got the players for 3-4 years max.
That's right.
And to be able to do that, the work that it takes. If Pete and I and Ryan could tell people anything, the amount of work that goes into it would blow your mind.
Yes, it really would. You have to have guys who love it. And I think Mark and Dale, they just love it. It's in their system. Their older brother, Ron, played junior. David played in the NHL. They both played in the NHL. Shoot, their niece was a scoring champion in college, U.S. college hockey.
You watch, she might just be the first female general manager someday in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, she might.
Lot of
Very highly regarded.
A lot of talk about, especially Megan right now, because the factor she's, as much as the announcement with the Hawks made of adding some female talent to their operations recently. It was I giggled with a friend of mine, Candace Moxley, who is head coach of the women's hockey team at Western, and her and Megan are friends, and she said to me, she goes, she kind of just joked, she's like, people were making a big deal and kind of saying, to her, we want to get her perspective. And she said to me, she goes, I always found it interesting that it was, obviously Kendall Gofield and, adding in. And she goes, and then in the bottom right-hand corner somewhere, it said, and they've also added Megan Hunter. But to your point, Mike, that's the scenario right now where there's talk that, that might be as the way that Megan has moved up the ranks, that there's a real possibility, especially with the factor of, Major League Baseball now having their first female, executive sort of thing. Do we think that this is going to, it's not outside the realm of possibility whatsoever, because she's super talented.
Oh, she is.
Yeah.
Understanding the game, the Hunter work ethic. I mean, she's got everything that you would want to have in an executive.
That's right. That's right. She does.
And then at the same point, to Pete's, and I know, Mike, you've heard these stories as much as this commentary that, from Pete, that, somebody has said that there was only one scout in a tournament in the middle of, Saskatchewan or whichever. It's usually an animal and a body part put together in either a state or a province somewhere. But the factor is they'll say, there was only one OHL scout there, and it was Mark Hunter.
Yeah, that's right. I heard that it was way out in Montana or Wyoming or somewhere.
Isn't that the Josh Anderson story, though?
Who?
Wasn't it Josh Anderson that he was just playing in a tournament somewhere, and it so happened that Mark Hunter just so happened to be there, and then all of a sudden this big tall kid wearing 77 shows up, and people go, what's with this guy? Is he going to be any good? Well, it's worked out pretty well for the Habs this year.
Mm-hmm. There are a few of them. Mark might have actually first found Josh on a baseball diamond. He was a great second baseman, and he was about 5'5", and then saw him play hockey, and he had the ability for baseball. The Patrick Kane story is great that way too, where the Knights had drafted Patrick Kane, and Pete, you'll remember, the family thought that, the OHL and his style of game, he's kind of a small player, might not mesh. And Mark kept the dialogue open, as he says he does. And, they were playing, I think, a tournament in Milwaukee. And Mark and Dale had driven to Milwaukee to watch Patrick Kane play. And Pat's family had said, you were in London, right? And they said, yeah, in London. You drove from London to Milwaukee to watch the tournament? No, we just wanted to come and see Patrick play and, see how he's doing and that sort of thing. Yeah. And it was that kind of a willingness to do that made Patrick's parents say, maybe there's something here that we're not seeing. Maybe they keep saying our son is an amazing hockey player and, he would be able to play in the Ontario Hockey League and have success. Maybe we got to start thinking about that. Next thing you know, they do make the decision to go to London. He's taken first overall, and now he's won 3 Stanley Cups.
I can remember, maybe you can, Mike. We were in Plymouth playing a game, and Pat Senior, because that's Mr. Kane's name, he was all worried about his son's future in this game, and is he going to make it in the NHL? And I don't know whether he should or what. I said, Pat, settle down. Your son is not only going to play this game well, he's going to do it with class and with distinction. He's going to be a star. And he sort of looked back at, the next year he was in Chicago. And he just proved himself right then and there. And I remember talking to Pat himself in the spring. He had been drafted by the Knights, and this was in the spring, and the playoffs were on. I said, are you coming to camp in the fall? He said, well, I don't know if I'm big enough to play in this league, but maybe I will. And he came to camp in the fall and just burned it up.
And here's the other thing to look at. What if a guy like Patrick Kane chooses to go the NCAA route because he was American born. And that was the way that his family was thinking, okay, you know, this is kind of the way that it goes. This is the process that we've been through, and he'll go and play college hockey, and that kind of suits his style and his skill level and that sort of thing. What if he doesn't come to the London Knights?
Yeah.
Do either of you think he goes first overall? And here's the other thing. Patrick Kane playing for the Knights would play the game and then immediately go back to his billet house and re-watch the game. He would record everything and he would watch the game over again. And when he came in the next day and they were breaking down video, he might have a conversation with Dale Hunter about, hey, did you see this and the way that that defenseman moved? And you see what I did there? I shouldn't have done that, right? And Dale would say, well, you know, here's how I saw that. And they'd have these great conversations. You know, that's priceless stuff. And what if he didn't get that? What if he went to an NCAA program where a lot of times your seniors and your juniors are the guys who are playing, not your sophomores and your freshmen. No. It is the older guys. So what happens then? Where does his development go? And as much as he was only here for a year, he absorbed so much in that year. And I think it really paved the way to who he became as a hockey player.
I think you're right on the money, Mike. And I you know, if he'd gone the college route, he'd have played all right, but nowhere near. And he wouldn't have got the attention that he got, because in those days, college hockey in the States wasn't as good as it is now, and it was nowhere near what the OHL was. They just didn't produce the number of kids that they're producing now. I think Pat, you know, was very, very fortunate, as the Knights were, that he chose to come to London.
And you mentioned it, you know, you've worked with a number of people, Mike, and this is the portion where I transition to, you know, embarrassing the hell out of Peter, which is always my favorite thing to do. But at what point does the young man in the above my head right now come into your career? Because I love when we get the PJ stories going, and so I know there's a number that, and this is the advantage, and this is what I said to Pete when I was trying to sell him on doing a podcast. I said, here's the thing, Pete, we're not going to go crazy. We're not going to do satellite radio, and Lord knows I'm not going to swear because my grandmother would have my you know what. But I said, you know, you know those stories we couldn't kind of tell when we were doing a post-game show? We can tell the stories, the good ones now. So, you know, I know you're a professional, Mike. You're not going to go outside the realm, but you know, when did Pete kind of come into your life and in your career, and kind of what was that first introduction like?
Well, you know what? The first introduction he wouldn't remember because we didn't get introduced.
Oh,
I remember being at a Western football game and, you know, enjoying things like news and sports. I had watched Pete on TV, so you knew who Pete James was. It doesn't take very long of living in London until you know, yeah, that's Pete James. And I can remember being on the sidelines, and it was at the end of a game, and it was a kind of a cold, miserable day. And I look over, and there was Pete with a camera person, and he had a big, long black trench coat on. And I slapped the person I was with, and I said, "Hey, that's Pete James." And that was the first time I saw Pete in person. And did I go over and talk to him? No. I would have been intimidated to do that. He was there with a camera person. He was doing his job. But I kind of stood back and watched a little bit as Pete ended off his stand-up and got everything done with the field in the background and the kind of the players leaving the field. And so I can remember watching that. So that was the first time I saw Pete in person. And then I was lucky enough a few years later to end up working with Pete, as, you know, when he became the color commentator, when he came to the station that we both worked at. And he ended up with the name, thanks to Steve Garrison, the Godfather. It made perfect sense to me. I mean, he had that big, long trench coat. So the Godfather of sports. And then he and I got to start doing games together at the London Ice House, where you had to kind of crawl into the press box. And once you were in. You weren't leaving to pee. So make sure you pee before the game starts. And so we would kind of shoehorn ourselves in there. And you know what? It was a blast. Being able to hang out with Pete on the road, travel, just listen to stories. Because Ryan, you know, if you say, hey, you know, I was just looking this thing up, and this guy played for the London Knights in 1972, and people say, yeah, and you know, there's a story about that guy. You know, watch this. Pete, let me try one. Andy Spruce Tell us the story of Andy Spruce.
Andy, the one I remember most about Andy was, didn't have a very good feeling. Didn't ended up very well. He was playing the Russians, and Long had him out there, and he threw a back pass to another guy. And while he was doing that, Andy got hit by a Russian, and it was a clean check, no question of it. And down he went, and he was out for the season, or a good part of it anywhere thereafter. And that just infuriated Bill Long. And he said to him, "Why are we playing these guys? You know, what do we get out of it other than our captain being injured?" So anyway, that was the one bad thing about Andy that happened, and a lot of other stories. He ended up coaching in Sudbury, as you know. And I can remember talking to him pre-game one night, and I said, "Hey, that kid over there," he said, "Peter, that's pure cement. That's pure cement." So, and it was too. But Andy and I always had a good relationship on and off the ice.
Mike, Ryan, you asked the question. That's what I got to have for years and years. That's how special it was.
I was gonna say, Mike, I think you and I, between you work with Peter a lot longer than I did, but at the same point, that's my favorite, because as you can see, as soon as he started talking, I just start giggling because it's just the fun thing to do. But I'm thinking, Mike, you and I, after the show, we should just start a list, and I think every show from now on, we'll just whether I bug you to kind of say, Mike, just record these 5 things, and we'll just say it'll just be Mike coming in for like 5 seconds, going, "Okay, Pete, so and so," and then we'll just have him tell the story.
I'm in. But no, you know what? It is an absolute blast to be able to do that and go out on the road.
Well, you can do the same thing, Stubbs. You can do it now.
Well, I mean, yeah, but not in the same way. You can do it for the entire franchise, which is pretty special. This London franchise, it's had a lot of successful players and a lot of great stories. So
London Nationals, before the Knights, they were the Nationals for 2-3 years.
And I mean, enjoying chicken and pasta on the road. And people always have this thing. For whatever reason, we still need to count it up, but the London Knights record on Saturday nights is impressive. And we would be on the road, and Pete would always have this line. Somebody would say, "How you doing?" A lot of the guys would call him Pistol Pete. "How you doing, Pistol?" And Pete would go, "It's Saturday night, and we won the game."
Yeah.
And that became a thing. Players would ask him to do it. So little things like that just little traditions, little commonalities throughout a long grind of a hockey season.
One of my favorite things, and it goes more towards you, Mike, is I've had people that know me, friends of mine, that are either hockey fans or so on and so forth. And when I was doing the post game show, they'd be like, "Do you know Mike Stubbs?" And I was like, "Yeah, Mike. I see him every Friday, that kind of thing." And my favorite thing, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, they go, "Is that his real voice, or is he putting that on? Is that a performance thing?" And I'm like, "No, that's you call Mike and talk to him about his favorite dinner or something like that. It's not a performance aspect." Have you had people kind of stop you, especially when they know it's you, and kind of go, because you're on buses now? I know how much you love that.
My favorite part about that is my daughter would send me pictures, because she goes to Western, and she would send pictures of the bus going by. "You're still here." So that would go by. But I mean, I always say in broadcasting, you've got to be 99% you, and 1% is not you. 1% is the you, but it's amplified about 1,000,000 times, because you have to be yourself. Otherwise, people will see through that in a second. I do an afternoon talk show, but I'm not somebody who has these big opinions and I'm going to tell you the way it is. I'm more into saying, well, here's what I think. What do you think? And so I have that. I'm not the person who at a party is going to be, you walk into the room and you immediately hear this big laugh and that's who it is, or that's the person telling jokes. I'll be the quiet person. But when you're on the air, you have to be, that little bit of yourself, again, amplified about 1,000,000 times. So, that's just kind of the way it is. So this is me as much as it can be.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're just a guy that loves what you're doing. No question of it. I heard you the other day talking about the dog chewing the telephone line or whatever it was, or the microphone line. I heard you the other day. and it happened. And that, the pooch got himself a free meal or something, and you lost the telephone connection.
And that's the neatest thing about the stuff that the three of us have been able to do. And if you get involved in broadcasting, the things that you get to do. I always say that you could interview the prime minister, and then immediately after that, in your next segment, you could interview someone who landed on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And in between those two interviews, the prime minister and somebody who had landed on the moon, you happen to say, and my son has a cold. And anybody coming up to you on the street will not mention your interview with the prime minister. They will not ask you about landing on the moon. They will say, how's your son? Heard he had a cold. And that's the kind of stuff that resonates.
Yeah, it is. And I have interviewed a prime minister, Stephen Harper, but I didn't get to the guy that was on the moon.
Big hockey fan.
Yeah,
Stephen.
he was. Yeah,
we've had him on Night's broadcast before.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. That's where I interviewed him on a Night's broadcast.
Mike, you mentioned that you're doing the show in the afternoons on Chorus with Global News, and I got to take it back just to a story side of things. When you and Pete were doing games together, it was obviously on a different station. The games moved to a new station, and you go along with it. I remember that there was kind of those couple days in between where it was announced that the Knights games were going to be moving, and I had a bunch of people say to me, what are they going to do now? Because, what's going to go on? And then shortly thereafter, it was, and Mike Stubbs will still be calling the games. I've got to imagine, I know that's outside of just, I'm not going to insider business or anything, but at the same point, that had to be complimentary for the fact that, very, very seldom in broadcasting do you see the broadcast move, and usually it's, well, thank you very much. And I know we're like sports right now, they're talking about Tim and Sid moving in different directions. I know the amount of times that Tim McAuliffe talks about the fact that he loved doing university sports, and when they no longer did university sports, it was kind of a tough thing for him. It had to be a complimentary factor that I'm sure the team probably was said, Mike is our guy, and the team has made no bones about it. Mike Stubbs is our guy. And the fact that you kind of went along with it, that had to be a great feeling.
You know what? I use that word lucky. Can I put it in caps for this one? Because that's just it. I mean, things are happening. You don't have control over very many things in life. And, you get lucky when all of a sudden your phone rings and you get to answer it, and you get to find out that, hey, there's a possibility that you can continue doing what you really love to do. So thank you to the Knights. Thank you to Chorus Radio London, and anybody else who was involved in sitting down after they figured out where the broadcast was going to be. Thanks for including me in that, because, and I know I've thanked them all personally, but yeah, that's, you never know. And again, I've been able to do so many things. Yeah. And so if this does come to an end, and I hope a lot of bosses aren't listening right now, but if this comes to an end later today, next week, in a few months, I always tell my wife, I've lived enough lifetimes that I'll walk up the beach and I'll find something else to do. Yeah, I'll get washed up on shore, and there's a lot of stuff out there. So I've been so fortunate that if my broadcasting career ended, I wouldn't sit back and say, man, wish I had done that. Because name somebody I've wanted to interview. I can't pick out anybody except for maybe Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, who I haven't been able to interview, who I've wanted to. You can make calls, and it's surprising the calls that will come back. I was doing a show a little while ago, and I've got some favorite interviews. Brian Burke is always one of my favorite interviews, because you ask Brian Burke a question, it's like asking Mark Hunter a question.
Yes.
You ask him a question, you're going to get an answer.
You get an answer.
You like it or not.
You might not like the answer, or it might be a very real answer. You're going to get an answer.
Have you read his book?
Interviewing Brian Burke. Tom Cochran is one of my favorite interviews. And I can remember an interview that we did one time where we were in studio together, and at the end of it, both of us had tears in our eyes, just for stories he was telling about some of the work he was doing in Africa. And he's a really tremendous guy. And I had just reached out to his management and said, if there's ever an opportunity to talk with Tom, I'd really like to do that. And I was doing a show one day, and again, your phone goes off and you pick up your phone, and it was Tom's manager and said, Tom has some availability at 1:45 today. Can you make that work? And I immediately sent back, yep. And I think I said yes to be nice and professional, but yes. And we made it work. We had a great conversation. And so little things like that will happen. And so if it came to an end, it comes to an end, but it's going to last.
You're spot on about Burke. Have you read his book?
I haven't. And that's something that I have on a list to do.
It's a good one. Get it and read it, Mike. You'll love it.
Here's the best part. I haven't read a book front to back since probably grade 10, and which if it wasn't sports, I didn't care. So that Burke's book was the first one I picked up because I'm the same way. It was one of those. All right, is this the brash guy that we see on TV and doing media availability and stuff like? It's got to be more to it, sort of thing. And then fantastic read. So not my review matters whatsoever, but
everybody's review matters.
Oh yeah, sure it does. What I got out of the book, he ended up by saying he loves Toronto, he loves the television business, broadcasting. He is here. 2 days later, he accepts a job with Pittsburgh. So I'll have to rewrite it.
Right? You never know.
You never know. And when that knock comes on the door, as you say, Mike, you pick up the phone, hello, and you don't know who it is. But Berkey is just so much hockey, and it's part of his DNA, hockey. So I could see him taking that job.
Mike, I remember talking to you once, and I'm going to spin the question on you here this time. And you said to me that some of the best questions to ask any athlete or anyone is not exactly about what they do on a day-to-day basis. And I remember your reference was Connor McDavid. Everybody, I remember going down to Erie. We were supposed to set up for a McDavid interview, and the guy who was doing camera afterwards said, "That's it. That wasn't that, I was expecting, he's Connor McDavid, he's, the next coming and so on and so forth." And I kind of said, I'm like, well, some guys, the best ones usually aren't the talkers. But I remember you saying to me, I asked him once, I want to say it was about Detroit Lions football, Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
But that was the thing. And I remember you'd said to me, I asked him about football, and all of a sudden goes off on a tangent. How many people walk up to you on a daily basis and want to talk about the London Knights? But what is this thing that if somebody walks up to you and says, "Hey, Mike, how about this?" You all of a sudden, that's your go-to? Because I'm sure talking about the Knights, as much as you love it, it's the day-to-day.
Yeah, you know what? I don't just anything. I'm a curious person. Here's what I try and do, and I'm still not very good at it. Ron McLean is the best I've ever seen at this. It's if someone comes up to you and because you might have, they might know you through your work, in other words. So, and people will know me through what I do for work. Ron does such a good job taking the conversation and making it about that person, because as much as you come up and you might talk about Knights or something that has come up on the talk show or something like that. I'm a curious person. I want to know about them. First off, I always try to ask someone's name because they might know my name, but I don't know their name. I always want to know that. And I always want to know something about them. And then I can bring that up on the air. Hey, in the concourse, Pete and I have done this in games all the time. We were just talking with and whoever it might be, and they were saying this because they might make a great point. So, as much as people want to ask you questions, I'd rather be the one asking the questions because my answers are going to be the same. It's fun to do what I do. It's great. How's the team doing? Well, Mark and Dale do a really good job. Team's probably doing really well. So let's talk a little bit about you. Let's learn about everybody else. We need to do more of that. And Ron McLean does that better than anyone ever.
Yep, he does. Yep. Except, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, go ahead, Pete.
No, I was just going to say time's a wasting. Mike, thanks a lot for this. From my standpoint, we've had a lot of fun together, and hopefully it'll continue on.
Oh, absolutely.
I got to get, there's got to be one little small Pete James story in the back of your mind that you just want to get out there, even if it does get him. As you say, when you said about how much you enjoyed seeing him for the first time, I remember I had the same thing. It was some sort of event at Western. He walked by and I went, that was me. And I told him later on in life, and his response was, so what? I'm just a guy.
All right, we got one. We got one. It's 2005, and the Knights have just finished up a sweep in Ottawa in the playoffs in the championship series against the 67s. So they're up 3-1. And that was the first time I think the team let themselves believe they could win a championship. And you might think it's crazy, but we'll have to talk about this another time. But the 2005 team never let themselves believe they were as good as they were. And that was one of the beauties of that team. That's one of the secrets of their success.
Yep.
And we ended up chartering home after that game. So we went to the airport and we got in the plane, we get up in the air. And I remember Pete had this look on his face and he looks over and I happen to be sitting in the window seat and he says, "Hey, Stubbsy, look down there. See those two lights?" And Pete is a wealth of information. And so I'm thinking, wow, what am I going to learn here? He says, "Yeah, see the two lights right down there. It's two of them right close together." And I thought, yeah, I see them. What, Pete, what is this? He goes, "One of them's Kingston and one of them's Belleville."
That's right. I remember that, Mike.
I thought we were going to get more out of this. I thought the two lights were going to be more than Kingston or Belleville. But
And they look very close together because they are. But
they look very close.
Yeah, they really are. And then we hit the big smoke, and then we started to come down. Over Woodstock, we started to come down.
Mike, I think you and I should just compile notes for a little bit, and then we'll do episode 2 with the three of us later on down the line, because I think there could be some fun, more fun to go along with it.
I'm in.
Yep. Yeah, count me in.
I'll start the list of names and we will compare later and we'll just add them into every show because it is the fun aspect to throw random names at Pete. And it's not just a scenario, oh, he had 42 goals and he did this and he did that. My favorite times where people would call into our show and say, "Hey, Pete, do you remember so-and-so?" And his response would be something along the lines of, "Oh, yeah, he really liked fried egg sandwiches, but only on Tuesday afternoons." And you'd be like, what?
Hey, the memory starts to fade with age, so you'll have to
Hardly. Holy cow, Pete, the number of things. Unreal. Keep up the great work.
All right,
we'll give it a whirl.
We will have some fun and we will bug Pete nonstop. And mostly importantly, thanks so much for doing this, Mike. I know it's you're a busy guy, so thanks for the time. And I look forward to episode 2, 3, and 4 with you, mainly because it's just fun to sit and chat with you two gentlemen who are definitely the voices of London sports. Pete, obviously, for his years, and Mike, I know you don't give yourself enough credit, but you know what you're doing now and today, and for the kids at Fanshawe, I know talking to those kids too. What it means to learn from you is fantastic because they just love the fact that they can soak all that knowledge in. So if I as the quote young guy around, I'm now the middle one. I'm no longer young enough. I'm not old enough. I don't know what the heck I am anymore. But all right, thank you for everything you do for London, for kids at Fanshawe, and for those kids that just want to get into broadcasting and being so open and available. It's fantastic.
I'm just a lucky guy. That's all.
Yeah, we all are. We're doing what we wanted to do, and we're still doing it here. I'll be 85 in a couple of months, and I'm still doing it. Still at it.
Doing it well. Keep it up.
Well,
thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Pete.